Welcome back to the back corner. This is your host, Zach. Just had a quick thing that I needed to throw at you before you get into the actual show. For part of tonight's episode, I spoke a little bit about an independent film, an independent documentary called Small Town Gay Bar. And I gave an incorrect summary of that movie, and I'm very upset with myself. I sincerely apologize. So I'm going to read you the actual synopsis for the film, and just, kind of ignore the little bit that I said about the movie that was incorrect later in the episode. The lives of gays in the Deep South are explored in this documentary, which looks at two bars in rural Mississippi that cater to a homosexual clientele. Rumors is in all other ways a modest neighborhood hangout. Crossroads is an anything-goes establishment. Interviews with regular patrons portray both bars as islands of acceptance in an ocean of prejudice, exemplified by the derision of customers at nearby straight bars and the cutting homophobia of anti-gay preacher Fred Phelps. Just wanted to throw that out there, that I had, kind of screwed up what this movie was about, and that really upset me, because I try to keep my stuff straight, my facts straight. It's not a gay joke. Correct information. And now for a poor segue into the episode. Welcome back to the back corner, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Zach. It has been far too long since we last got together. I went to record this episode a few weeks ago, and my equipment had decided to stop working. It just absolutely crapped out on me and just wouldn't do anything for me anymore. So I had to take that out into the woods and, bury it in a shallow grave, and I had to make sure it was in the pet cemetery. And wait, you're not supposed to do it in the pet cemetery. So got some new equipment, and we're back with a voice as smooth as liquid butter. This is a special episode for a couple of reasons. This episode is my return to all four of you loyal listeners, and it's also going to be the last episode of its kind, because I'm going to be changing things up a little bit. I've talked a lot in the past about setting up my Patreon, which I'm going to finally be doing, and these kinds of episodes are going to go away because of that. Not entirely, but they're going to they're just not going to be the base episodes of the show. They're going to be specials for Patreon subscribers, and maybe a special weekly episode. There'll still be a show. It just won't be as detail oriented as these. We're going to cover more news and do more general reviews instead of these painstaking, nearly 2-hour long, make me hate my life because I hate editing reviews that you have come to know and love. They're not going away totally, but they are going to kind of go away a little bit. I had pulled up tons of horror news to cover last time we got together, but that was several weeks ago, and I don't know what's going on in the world of horror right now, and I didn't really feel like checking it out. I just had to get this episode out of my system because it's been way too long. So, without further ado, tonight's episode, we're going to be covering Red State, Kevin Smith's 2011 return to filmmaking after he decided he was done. He had finished. He had done everything he'd wanted to do. His podcast empire was starting to take off at this point. He was doing a lot of Q&As, a lot of live shows and stuff, and he just felt like he had done everything he'd wanted to do in filmmaking at that point, and he didn't feel like he had anything left to say. This is post Zack and Miri, which is another one of my favorite films of his. Dude, all of his movies are good. I don't care what anybody says. So a little bit of backstory about this movie before we get into it. If you've ever seen Kevin do a Q&A, if you've ever been to one of his Q&A shows, or you watched him online or listened to his podcasts or whatever, then you likely know the story behind Red State. For those of you that don't, it started when one of Kevin's good friends, Malcolm, was shooting a documentary called Small Town Gay Bar about various local gay bars across the country. And one of the people that Malcolm interviewed for the documentary was former leader of the Westboro Baptist Church, Fred Phelps. I say former because thankfully for all of us, he's dead. But he interviewed him for the documentary, and Kevin was asking him all kinds of questions about it. What was he like? What was the interview like? how did you handle that being a gay man yourself? How, what was sitting down and talking to him like? And he told him, it was very intimidating. It was kind of terrifying because of who he is and what he does or did. And he said that he shot like an hour and a half worth of footage. And you do that when you're doing documentaries or you're doing stuff like that. You'll shoot hours upon hours upon hours upon hours and then just use 10 to 15 seconds or a couple minutes. But it's important to have as much as you can to work with. So Kevin asked him for the footage because he wanted to watch it, and so he gave him the raw footage of the interview. Kevin went to go watch it in his bedroom, and Kevin's wife Jen told him absolutely not. She didn't even want to see that miserable old bastard. And Kevin was like, it's educational. But Jen wasn't hearing it, so she didn't even want it in the house from what I can remember him telling the story. So he went into his office on an old tube TV, and he said he had to stand next to it with his arm up on top of the TV. He said he always says like Dracula, covering the top of the TV and always looking over his back to make sure nobody was seeing him watch it. And he said he was watching it, and he just couldn't believe the kinds of things that were coming out of this person. Just so much evil and just mean-spirited shit, just garbage. But he said at the same time it was oddly fascinating. It was captivating. He had this power to pull you in, even though you knew what you were listening to was nonsense. He had this power to bring you in. It was weird. So Kevin was talking to Malcolm not long after that, and they were talking about the Westboro Baptist Church and how they protest funerals and anything that's fun. They've started protesting Comic-Con in the last few years. It's ridiculous, which prompted cosplayers and convention goers to start making their own ridiculous signs, counter-protesting them. The Westboro signs are religious protester signs. Not necessarily them sometimes, I don't think, but you'll see their goofy-ass signs, and then you'll see stuff like God hates Wolverine, or just stuff about Galactus being Lord or something. So, in the last few years, people have kind of taken the piss out of him, which is great. But Kevin and Malcolm were talking about him, and Kevin was like, he had this idea about an extreme version of these protesters. He was like, what happens when there's no funerals? They gotta make the bodies. And Malcolm was like, that's a terrible idea. That's just stupid. And Kevin was like, no, fuck you. That's an awesome idea. So he sat down and wrote Red State. Red State is more or less it's about a couple of kids, 3 kids, who through this Tinder-esque dating app in 2011 hook up for some sex with an older woman, and they end up falling into a trap set by this group of people called the 5 Points Church. And the 5 Pointers are more or less an outrageous exaggeration on the Westboro people, like pushed to the extremist level of absurdity. The leader of the 5 Pointers is portrayed by Michael Parks, who died a couple months ago. I can't remember exactly when it happened. I was very upset to find that out. He plays Aben Cooper, the leader of the church. I was very upset to find out he had died. This was the first time I had been introduced to Michael Parks. I mean, I'd seen him in other things as I grew up. From Dusk Till Dawn. He was in a lot of Quentin Tarantino movies, but I think his first biggest thing was From Dusk Till Dawn. He was the sheriff in the beginning of the movie in the gas station that gets killed. No, he wasn't the sheriff. He was, I can't remember who he was in that movie, but he was one of the people in the beginning of the movie in the gas station that died. But I had come to really appreciate him as a performer. He put everything of himself into his work. You could see it, that he loved and appreciated acting as an art form and performing, and there are some people you can just see just really love what they're doing, no matter what it is or how crazy it is. So Kevin brought him in. He wasn't too keen on doing it in the beginning, if I remember correctly, but he came around pretty quickly, and it's the stories, man, that Kevin has about this dude from set are just they're so much fun to listen to, man. This guy was so good. He was so great. He just loved performing and entertaining. He would later appear in Kevin's film Tusk, the first part of the True North trilogy. He was set to appear in Yoga Hosers, the second part of that trilogy, but couldn't due to health concerns. He was a little unwell during the time they were filming, so they had to swap him out. And he was supposed to appear in Moose Jaws. That's not going to happen now. So I wanted to do this episode right after he died as sort of a memorial to him. But, one reason or another, I never did end up getting around to do it. So after Kevin came up with this absurd idea and he pitched it to Malcolm told him it was crazy. Kevin developed the script and just couldn't get anybody to pick it up, because if you know this movie, you'll understand why most people really didn't want to pick this movie up, because it's insane as a concept and just as a general movie. Like, why does this movie exist? This movie's bonkers, but I love it. Partly because I am a godless heathen, and this movie really speaks to me on that level. But I'm kind of a sort of a mark for Kevin. It's a really big inspiration for me. With all of that ranting out of the way, let's get into the super detailed, way too long, far over-explanatory, detailed breakdown of Red State. Alright, so the movie opens with one of our three heroes, who are Travis, Billy Ray, and Randy. And if you're looking for a Bill shot in this movie, I don't think there is one. I know I've said in the past that every movie has one, but sometimes when you have a good filmmaker, you won't have a Bill shot. As far as I can remember, there's no Bill shots in this movie. Everything serves a purpose. Sorry to disappoint you guys. There is no Bill shot this time around. But one of our future installments may, in fact, have a literal shot of a dude named Bill who has been shot. May or may not. Spoiler alert, it does. So the film opens up with Travis riding around in a car with his mother. He notices some firemen taking down one of their old emergency horns, like this really big, just crazy big thing, like the size of a church bell, which, could just be something, it could be nothing. Travis BS's with his mom about school, and they drive up past a funeral, and there's a large group of 5 Point protesters outside. Wait a minute. Jared? Who's Jared? I really should have gone over these notes. Anyway, so after we see the 5 Pointers protesting at the funeral, there's shots to focus on youngsters and stuff like that, really showing that these people are just sick bastards. Cut to Travis is running into the school, and it is here that we get introduced to his pal Jared, who I had completely forgotten about. The teacher asks why Jared was late. He tells the teacher about the 5 Pointers, and then everyone chimes in about how much they suck. Teacher talks about how much the 5 Pointers suck. Everybody agrees that they're all a bunch of garbage. Class is over. Cut to Travis and Jared talking about the Tinder-like app that I spoke about earlier. And they say, quote, "It's Craigslist for people who want to get fucked." The next line is, "I thought Craigslist was Craigslist for people who want to get fucked." Oh, that's fantastic. Aren't high school kids the best? Like, it's weird. Like, you really shouldn't be rooting for these kids because they're high school chodes, I mean, they're doing what every high school boy would be doing. I mean, we were all gross, disgusting, sex-obsessed animals back then. And I mean, they're doing what we all would do. They saw an opportunity to experiment with their their sexual powers, and they took it. They took the opportunity. Turned out not to be the best thing for them. So enter Billy Ray, this tall, lanky-looking doofus with a mullet, and as soon as he comes into the scene, he gets punched in the dick, because that was something else we did as young men. We were always punching each other. It was weird. So they argue, the trio argue about how on this website you can't see people's faces, and they don't want to bang any ugly bitches, is how I remember them putting it. That's what I have in my notes. I'm pretty sure that's how they put it. Jared doesn't care about faces. He is just down to party. He's DTF, as people in 2009 might have said. Jared's been texting with someone, and they have arranged to go and the trio, he's arranged for the trio to go and have sex with someone all at once, which don't really think your first sexual experience should be a four-way. I mean, you want to work up to that. You don't. I mean, people just jump in. You can't learn to swim if you don't jump in. Yeah, well, that's like learning how to swim in the ocean. It's dangerous. You have no idea what you're doing. Everybody's going to get wet and very unhappy. So we cut to the guys in their PE class going over all the details. Cut to Travis, who's at home at night. His parents are watching the news. He says he's going to take their car. Mom tells him to stay and watch because they were on TV. Back earlier in the movie when they went past the protesters, there was a news crew talking to them, and apparently you could see their family on the news in the background of the shot. Everybody loves being on local news. The news talks about the protesters, the funeral that they're out protesting. I don't understand the point of protesting a funeral. Like, that person's already dead. What are you trying to stop? They're not going to reanimate them. This isn't Frankenstein. Stop it. The ideology doesn't make any sense. You know what? I'm overthinking it. So this funeral was a local kid from Travis's high school who was a gay kid, and he was found in a dumpster wrapped head to toe in plastic wrap. And if I remember correctly, it was during this broadcast where they mentioned that this isn't the first time this has happened. This has been going on for a while. Like, they've found more bodies like this. So Travis sees this, and then he lies about going to see a movie with the guys. Mom or Dad one tells him to come back, make sure he brings the tank back full. So cut to them all drinking in Travis's car. Billy Ray's trying to figure out the logistics of all three of them having sex with this woman. Jared makes fun of him for being socially backwards. Billy Ray seems kind of like a dumb guy. He doesn't know that much. He's just kind of dumb. So he's trying to figure out how they're all gonna go party like this. And so during the ruckus in the car, they sideswipe a car that was parked on the road. The guys get out of the car to check the one that was parked. Both cars are all scraped up. And here we're introduced to Stephen Root, who you will probably know from, oh my god, what hasn't he been in? Oh geez, he was Bill Dauterive in King of the Hill. He was the guy in Office Space with the stapler. I believe you have my stapler. He was that guy. He was in Dodgeball. He was the fat kind of weird guy, the know-it-all kind of guy that wore the goggles and had the wife that didn't love him and the kids that hated him. He got hit in the nuts with a wrench, I think, by Rip Torn, or he punched him in the junk. I don't remember. He's been in a bunch of stuff. Go check him out. So Stephen Root shows up here. He scares the living piss out of these kids because to them the car looks empty, and he sits up in the seat. They freak out, get back in their car, and drive off. The car wasn't empty. He wasn't alone. His seat was reclined, and he was receiving oral sex by another dude, which comes back to play later as part of his story arc. So, cut to, the boys are all arguing about the car. Travis wants to go home, freaking out about the damage. Jared just wants to go and have sex with this random woman, and Billy Ray wants to get in on that too, because nothing says fun like mullets, right? So they pull up to this old pull-behind trailer in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Now, if these kids were smarter, they wouldn't have agreed to have sex with some random woman in the middle of nowhere in a pull-behind trailer. Nothing about that says, hey, this is a good idea, and you've taken our well-being into consideration, and I really appreciate that. No. All of that screams, we're gonna get murder dead. An older woman comes out of the trailer to greet them, who is Melissa Leo. And I feel so bad, I can't remember anything that she's been in. She won an Oscar, I think, like right before, or an Emmy or something right before this movie came out. She's playing Sarah, and she's drinking an old beer, nasty old beer, good old beer. They exchange pleasantries. And one of the first things she says to these kids is, I bet you boys want to get up to the devil's business, don't you? That right there should have been one of the many signs that they needed to leave, because that's not something a normal person says to another human being. And she says, "The devil's right in here," gestures for them to come inside. And the boys go in because they can't resist the sweet call of Poonander and beer. I actually put that in my notes. That's something that I typed. Jesus. Cut to Stephen Root's car pulling into the sheriff department. Turns out he's playing the sheriff. So he walks into the department, tells his partner, his deputy, who is played by... I don't remember that guy's name. He was most recently on Dimension 404 in the pilot episode. He was the roommate, and he was one of Jesse's buddies in Breaking Bad, which I think is where most people know him from. So he's telling his deputy about getting sideswiped. Says he was parked making reservations for his 19th anniversary. He's lying. Oh no, his 19th anniversary, he's married and getting blown by other dudes in the woods at night. This dude has some stuff he's not ready to accept or deal with. Deputy says he's wanting to take his wife somewhere for their 5th anniversary, somewhere overseas like Europe. So they bullshit for a little bit. And Stephen Root tasks his deputy with finding the boys that swiped him. When the deputy leaves, Stephen Root pulls out some booze, has himself a nice cry while he's looking at his wife's photograph, because he knows what he's doing is wrong and horrible, and he should feel bad about it. So back at the trailer, the boys are getting nice and drunk. Sarah says it takes her a couple beers to work up to the sex. That's exactly how she puts it, too. She unloads more beer onto the boys, and then she says this line, "I don't let no man in me unless he's got at least 2 beers in him." Awesome. That's disgusting. So this Sarah lady's acting really weird. She's acting like she's up to something, you know? So she tells the boys to go into the back, start stripping. So then they all start, debating on who's going to get to go where and when and all that stuff. And Sarah is very adamant about these boys drinking beer. Like, she keeps pushing it on them real hard. Peer pressure is a hell of a thing. So as the boys start undressing, they start passing out. Things are about to get bad. As the boys black out, some new silhouetted figures are seen entering the trailer. So let this be a lesson, kids. If you ever agree to have sex with a random person that you've never met in the middle of nowhere at night in a pull-behind trailer, it's not going to go well for you. So just, keep that in mind. So we fade out to black, fade back in on Jared, sitting inside a cage, being rolled somewhere covered with a sheet. And he starts to panic. He starts, screaming for help and smacking on the cage and stuff. Someone from the outside starts banging on the cage, signaling for him to shut up. Then we start to hear church-esque music and singing. This is where things start to get creepy. The first time that you watch this movie, if you watch this movie before you listen to this, which I highly advise that you do if you've never seen Red State, I want you to watch that movie and just let yourself be taken by this film. It's captivating. It's infuriating, but you can't stop watching it. This next scene especially, you're glued to it the entire time, and you can't look away from it. It's so powerful, and it feels so genuine and real, and it's terrifying all at the same time. So we start to hear the church music and the singing. The sheet covering Jared's cage is then pulled off by a child. Then we see the inside of what looks like a church. It's been mocked up to look like one. Cut to behind Michael Parks, who, as I said earlier, is playing Aben Cooper, the leader of the Five Pointers, and he's leading everyone in song. During the cuts in this scene, we see Cheyenne, played by Carrie Bishi. I don't know how to say her last name. I'm very sorry. But we see her. She'll come into play later. Aben Cooper boasts about the press coverage they've been getting. Jared looks out, sees a figure covered by a white sheet in front of a large cross. This cross is huge. Jared keeps screaming for help, while Aben plays around with his various family members in the church. Jared curses. Aben orders one of his fellow members to jab Jared with a cattle prod. And Aben, one of the things that Michael Parks did in this role, and that he talked about, if you watch the extras on the DVD or the Blu-ray, whatever you got, I found it on DVD. Don't judge me. Don't you judge me. One of the things he talked about was, this character Aben Cooper completely believes in everything that he's doing. And that's one of the things that makes him such a good villain. You know, he has a cause that he legitimately believes in, that he fights for. But then you also have to humanize him. And by seeing him interact with his family, his grandchildren, and stuff like that, you see that to him and to all these other people, he's a good man. What he's doing is the right thing, even though to everybody else it's the wrong thing. And that's what makes a great villain. What he everybody sees what they're doing as the right. They're doing a service. They're doing a good thing, even though it is unspeakable horror to rational minds. It's just everyday business for them. And that's part of what makes this performance of Aben Cooper so damn good and captivating and just I don't have enough good things to say about this movie. I can't articulate the right words to tell you how much I love this film. So back to the Jesus. Aben delivers an unbelievable sermon. It's chock full of crazy horse shit. You can see that this character 110% believes in every single word that comes out of his mouth. And then he just continuously has fun with his family. And these people are nuts to this shit. They are crazy. So I didn't take many notes on... I didn't take any notes. I tried. I tried and I just couldn't do it on the dialogue and everything that Michael Parks does in this scene, because you have to see it to believe it, to fully understand this character and his motivations and all of the little touches that Michael Parks add to this character. You can't describe it to someone. You have to see it, which is another reason that I implore you to see this movie. It's not going to be, at the end of the episode, it's not going to be like everything else. It's okay. It's a good way to spend an afternoon. You can make your own decision. No. Find this movie. Watch this movie. It's on Google Play. It should be on iTunes. I haven't checked iTunes. Order it off Amazon. Find a way to see this film. So then we get some exposition about Aben's grandfather starting this church. And then we get several minutes of gay bashing and about how they are the tools of Satan and the moral backbone of the country has weakened. I feel like this movie, when it came out, was topical, sure. But I kind of feel like now even more so, with just how butt-ass stupid it seems everybody has become. It's crazy. I was actually talking to my brother about that the other day concerning the film God Bless America, which I might end up doing if you guys have never seen that. It's crazy, but that's a story for another day. So now we see the figure under the sheet, standing at the cross, move and start moaning. And if you haven't figured it out yet, that's a person. Cut to Travis realizing that is a person, and he is freaking the hell out. Mr. Cooper has Cheyenne take the little ones out of the church, saying it's gonna get grown up in here. And he even goes with him. He helps walk the little kids out. He loves his kids. Anyway, so here's where shit gets bad. Aben says, "Would y'all like to see who we have to thank for the extinction of the human race?" And he pulls the sheet off the dude at the cross and says, "It." And here we have a dude wrapped in saran wrap, wearing a ball gag. Remember the kid in the wrap from earlier? Yeah, see? Okay. See, now we're talking. Aben talks about how the internet is the devil's technology, and they harness that technology and act as wolves, harvesting sheep in their chat rooms to persuade people with sex so they can kill them. He talks about how the Bible condemns killing, but only killing of your fellow man, not of insects like the poor saran wrap guy. He says you don't mourn the loss of a germ when it's been cured. Aben starts talking scripture and the wrath of God, pointing to several men in the pews. They get up and converge on the saran wrap guy in what is one of the most horrifying, uncomfortable, fucked up scenes of the movie, of any movie, honestly. And so they wrap dude's head with more saran wrap, securing his head to the cross. But I gotta say, this is a pretty effective way to murder somebody. It really cuts down on the cleanup. So, I mean, if they're doing something right, they're efficient at murder, I guess. So, they wrap dude's head up with more plastic wrap. They grab a revolver. The individual holding the revolver, if you're familiar with Kevin's podcasts, you may recognize as Ralph Garman, the Hollywood Babylon co-host and voice actor of a lot of different characters in Family Guy. Random characters in Family Guy. He was in A Million Ways to Die in the West, one of my favorite movies. Not a huge fan of Seth MacFarlane very much anymore, but I love that movie because I love the West and I love comedies, and it's just really funny. Ralph Garman plays the guy who tells the kid in the movie, he says, "Take your hat off, that's a dollar bill." And he was also the Nazi doctor in Yoga Hosers, the role that Michael Parks was supposed to take, but couldn't. So Ralph Garman's character, who, if I remember correctly, is named Caleb. I've got him later in my notes because I forgot. I was like, well, maybe I'll talk about that, maybe I won't. But he grabs a revolver, this big fucking revolver, puts it down on the top of dude's head, and fires one shot straight down into dude's head. And he's done for, because that's what happens when you get shot in the head. And it's crazy. They shoot him, and then like this little plume of fire pops out of the bullet hole. It's bonkers. So using more saran wrap, starting at the top of the head and wrapping under the chin, they wrap the bullet hole to, once again, minimize the cleanup effort. And then they pop open a trap door, revealing that Billy Ray and Travis are wrapped up together under the stage, and they drop this poor dead dude down into the trap hole with them. And during this whole scene, Jared has managed to pull the sheet from inside his cage. After the kid uncovered him, they put the sheet back on him. He pulls the sheet into the cage so that he can see what's going on, which, frankly, you really shouldn't want to see that happen. So one of the five pointers tells another one to grab Jared and put him on the cross. Jared fights, protesting that he's not gay, but it doesn't matter to these people. Aben starts playing the piano while his church members are wrapping Jared to this cross, still protesting his sexuality. And the whole time, dude, there's this light, fun, happy church music, and there's a dude screaming because he knows he's about to get killed. It's uncomfortable and horrifying 100 times over. Aben tells Jared, he says that he might be worse than someone who's gay for wanting to share a woman with other men in the same bed. Jared screams for help, saying, "I don't want to die." To which Aben replies, one of my favorite lines in the movie. He says, "You already dead, sinner. You destroyed your spirit in a waste of shame." Cut to the exterior of the church as a police car rolls by. It's the deputy. Shines his light at some cars outside and recognizes the boy's car from the sheriff's description. The tension in this movie is just insane because, you're hoping and hoping and hoping these kids will get out, they'll get away, they'll live, and then here you've got the cop. But if you know horror, you know that that's just not going to happen. Happy things don't happen in horror movies. That's why they're not called happy movies. So, cut to Travis and Billy Ray under the stage. Billy Ray's freaking out. Travis is trying to figure out how to escape. Travis says that he thinks a bone popped out of the dead dude when he hit the ground, which is gross, but, he says he can feel something stabbing him. So they kind of maneuver around to use the protrusion to cut the plastic wrap. Back inside the church, Cheyenne is watching the deputy on a security camera. Aben signals for everyone to be silent. Cut to the deputy. Aben confronts him outside. The deputy tells him about the car accident, telling him that the car on his property matches the damage of the car in the description of the accident. Cut to Billy Ray and Travis. They've cut the plastic. Cut to Aben bullshitting the deputy about how it's his daughter's car and, teenagers and blah, blah, blah. Back inside, the boys have broken out of the basement room, but they've made too much noise and caught the attention of those upstairs. One of the five pointers looks down into the basement to see Billy Ray trying to get the plastic off Travis's wrists and ankles, but he can't cut it, so he abandons him. The five pointer signals for quiet and makes his way downstairs. 99% certain that this is Ralph Garman that I'm talking about right here. Cut back to Aben Cooper trying to, kind of sweep the deputy away, rambling about insurance and stuff. He's just trying to get him out of the property and get him to go away. Cut back to Billy Ray running around the basement. Ralph Garman's chasing him around. He has no idea where he's going. Back to the deputy, and he says that he saw the five pointers protest the Pope's funeral. And he asks Aben Cooper if Italy is nice, because remember, he's wanting to take his wife overseas. Back to Billy Ray. He's made his way into a locked room, an armory to be exact, filled with semi-automatic, fully automatic rifles, shotguns, a little bit of everything. Anything and everything you could ever want in an armory. Back to Aben BSing with the deputy about Italy. Billy Ray grabs a gun and gets ready to fight, and Ralph Garman shoots him straight in the face. Billy Ray manages to squeeze off several rounds as he gets shot and falls to the floor, killing Ralph Garman in the process and making one hell of a ruckus. Cut to the churchgoers reacting and the children reacting. Cut to the deputy. He heard it. He goes to grab his radio instead of going for his gun. What he should have done was drawn first, then made the call. But he went for the radio first. He does manage to get the call for shots fired at the church back to the sheriff, and then is promptly killed. Stephen Root is trying to make sense of the situation, and then Aben Cooper taunts him over the radio, telling him that he has photos of the sheriffs engaging in extramarital activities, and he threatens to blackmail him if he pursues the report of shots fired. Then we get a scene of Stephen Root loading his revolver, his service revolver, I guess, to kill himself because he can't deal with, the things that he's done and the shame and the guilt and all that. But before he does, he notices the bulletin board in his office and his most wanted, the most wanted sheets. So he grabs a number for an ATF agent, which, if you're not familiar with the ATF, is the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. They do a lot of different things. Cut to black. Fade into John Goodman waking up from a phone call. That's right, folks. John Goodman's in this movie. So, if you ever doubted the legitimacy of Kevin Smith, he had John Goodman in a movie, and this is one of the best roles you'll ever see John Goodman in. Because, he's usually doing something hilarious, but when he's doing serious, when he's doing drama, like this, or 10 Cloverfield Lane, oh my god, John Goodman in 10 Cloverfield Lane. Or Kong, Skull Island, any of these three, man, is some of the best work you'll ever see from this guy. So Goodman wakes up, he's on the phone, he's discussing the details of a preliminary investigation, mentions reports that the members of the Five Pointers were seeking to purchase automatic weapons, semi-automatic weapons in 2004. There were unconfirmed reports that they did receive them. Testimonies from someone who sold them some shotguns said that they made inquiries about weapon modifications, which, weapon modifications are illegal for the most part. You can't turn a weapon into a fully automatic weapon. That's illegal. You can't make a sawed-off shotgun because that's illegal. There are certain weapon attachments that, you're not supposed to, as a normal citizen, you're not supposed to be able to purchase. But because nobody cares, you can. So, cut back to the church. The remaining Five Pointers are rolling Caleb, Ralph Garman, like I said. They're rolling Ralph Garman out into the church for like an impromptu funeral service. Sarah is heartbroken. Apparently, that was her husband. Aben tries to console her, and he takes her down into the armory room where we find Billy Ray and Travis's bodies, telling her that he sent those two devils to hell and saved them all with his last dying breath. But wait, how did Travis get there? He was still tied up under the stake. You'll see. So Sarah takes some aggression out on their bodies, kicking them and screaming mean things at them. Aben tells her to save her anger for the one upstairs. Poor old Jared is still wrapped up to this cross. So they walk out of the armory, and he sings to her as they exit the scene. Pan back to inside of the armory. The camera rotates back into the back, and Travis waits until they're out of earshot, and then he moves. So he managed to escape his bonds and used his friend as cover, because sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Cut back to John Goodman on the phone again. He says the group has approximately 20 to 25 members, all related by blood or marriage, making it impossible for infiltration. He goes on to talk about a bomb had been set off at their property, and it spooked them into tearing down their barns and building barricade fences. He questions, seemingly to be Stephen Root. I'm not entirely certain who he was talking to. Fairly certain it was him based on the evidence at hand. He asks him if he thinks mobilizing on the compound is wise at this juncture, citing that if they had a few more days, they could get something better to investigate than a missing deputy. After a few moments of silence, he says they can be ready in an hour. So Stephen Root has contacted the ATF, has spoken to the handler of this investigation, and is staging an assault, partially because of his deputy, and partially to keep anyone from finding out that he's a dude banging wife cheater. So, trying to cover his ass. Not really a moral imperative as much as it is he's just trying to cover his ass. So, We cut back to the basement. Travis is now wielding what looks like to be an AR-15, trying to escape the church. Now, for someone like me, who has experience with firearms, and other people who have experience with firearms, this is not outside the realm of believability to just grab one of these guns and, contra your way out of this place. Most people don't. Most people can't even figure out how to load a magazine. So, you can make up whatever backstory you want about this. Just something to think about. So Travis starts hearing music, and he follows it back into the main area of the church. And Aben is playing piano, and he's singing. They've got Caleb under a sheet up on the steps. Everybody's all sad and crying and stuff. Travis peeks into the room, trying to line up a shot at various church members, sweeping across the front row of pews and the edge of the stage. Now, logic would dictate that he is one person, presumably doesn't know entirely how to use this gun. There are a lot more of them than there are of him, so shooting your way out's probably not a good idea. He spots Jared all wrapped up on the cross, and after a moment decides to make his move. He waits until everyone is distracted by a grieving Sarah, and bolts, just makes a run for it. He runs through the church, through a back door in the back of the church. And all of the remaining male 5-pointers chase after him, and he leaves Jared on the cross because, what other choice did he have? Have a shootout, probably end up getting Jared killed anyway. Come on. Cut to a badass chase scene through the upstairs part of the compound as Travis runs for his life. He finally finds his way out. He's out in the sun, the fresh air of the world, and is promptly shot in the chest. And does this wicked spill into a fountain, and then he's all dead and floating and stuff. It's pretty cool. 5-pointers take cover inside the house. Cut to a shot that pans up from the fountain. I don't remember where the shot starts, but the camera pans up to the gate of the compound, showing SUVs, an APC, police cars, dudes in SWAT teams, guys with guns. It's just they're ready for war. And John Goodman is there, and he is pissed. John Goodman is screaming, "Who fired that shot?" Who was that? Turns out it was Stephen Root who fired the shot. John Goodman berates him because Travis didn't open fire on them. He yells they've got kids in the compound, kids that just got turned into hostages, and he strips Stephen Root of his rifle and tells him to wait in his vehicle. Back in the house, everyone is arming up, taking positions. Back at the barricade, John Goodman, and hey, look at that, it's Kevin Pollak. Crack jokes about the giant cross, says, how do you get a valley this beautiful all to yourself? Put a giant fucking cross on your front lawn? Awesome lines, I love it. So John Goodman and Kevin Pollak discuss possible infiltration options. Goodman then reads to the compound that they're here to execute a search warrant on suspicion of violation of the National Firearms Act. He orders them to put down their weapons and come out with their hands up, and they will not be harmed. They wait for a response, and they get nothing. Goodman tells Pollak to get a line open to them, and Pollak is shot in the face. Gun battle ensues with the 5-pointers and the ATF. John Goodman puts in a call for backup, describes the situation. He's on the phone with his superiors. He describes the situation, and then has one of the best lines of the movie. He says, "You said this was going to be a simple in and out, sir?" Holds the phone up so that they can hear the gunfight, and he says, "Simple just shit itself." Glorious. So glorious. His commander is worried about the local media. Goodman tells them they're not a factor. Goodman gets a very upset look on his face, says maybe they should get the deputy director on the call, tells his commander that there are kids inside. He pleads for 10 minutes to get a line into the compound, and then he demands something in writing to protect himself and his field office. And he says he's going to need something more substantial than his commander's word. He says he wants a text, an email, or something he can stand behind. His orders have changed in a way that he wasn't happy with. Cut to Cheyenne running from the house. She gets cornered by a random agent. He's drawn on her, and she tells him there are kids inside. She wants to get them out of the house before something happens to them. Cut back to John Goodman in horse stables. One of his lieutenants comes up to him and says, John Goodman briefs him on the phone call. They were ordered to eradicate this domestic terrorist cell. The agent doesn't want to conduct the op without intel. They don't know the situation inside the house, and Goodman reads off a message from their commander, the text or the email or something they could get behind. says our investigation of the 5 Point Church of Cooper's Dell has uncovered an extremely hostile domestic terrorist cell, heavily armed with intentions of bombing the local shopping mall this morning. When we came with arrest warrants, they opened fire on us, killing the assistant special agent in charge, leaving us no choice but to take the premise with deadly force. In the resulting firefight, all suspects were killed. The agent argues that there are kids and women. He says the suits aren't here. We're here. You're here. You can call this. Obviously implying that they can't make field calls because they aren't the ones in the field. The suits, they can't. They're not out there in the shit. They don't get to make those decisions, which I'm sure a lot of people who worked in any sort of enforcement or military work probably could argue and agree with. So they argue about the situation. Goodman tells the agent to prepare his men to breach the house. That agent's not happy about it. Cut back to, the agent with Cheyenne comes over the radio, tells them he's got one of the pointers out, that she wants to get the kids out of the house, without the rest of the house knowing. The agent with John Goodman relays the use of deadly force, and Cheyenne starts freaking out. Cut back to the agent with Cheyenne. She points out that she's not armed. Cut back to the agent with Goodman, and he tells the guy with Cheyenne that those are his orders. He then storms out of the stables, telling Goodman that it's the wrong move. Cut back to Cheyenne. She's pleading that they aren't terrorists, and you can see that this agent is having a battle of inner turmoil. He doesn't want to have to shoot this young girl and probably children, but he does have to follow his orders, and you can see that on this guy. So he pulls a small revolver from his ankle, grabs Cheyenne, holds her to him, puts the gun in her hands, and fires all 6 rounds out of it, just willy-nilly at nowhere. He then gives her the gun and tells her to go back into the house. She fights and argues with him because she knows that he's going to shoot her in the back, which, come on, man. You're going to shoot a kid in the back? Come on. So, during this, Sarah walks up behind the agent and shoots him in the back of the head. Cheyenne and Sarah return to the house, and Sarah berates her for trying to abandon her family. Cheyenne tells her the ATF thinks that they're terrorists and they're going to kill them, to which Sarah says, "Good! Then I'll be in heaven with Caleb. Isn't that what you want? To be with your daddy and Jesus in heaven?" This bitch is crazy. Cheyenne says, "What about the little ones?" And then Sarah says, "How sharper than a serpent's tooth to have a thankless child," which, I don't know what that means. Godless heathen. Sarah tells her to get on her knees and pray for God's forgiveness, and then hands her a gun and tells her to join the family after she's done praying. And then we cut to Abe and Cooper and Sarah talking, shooting out the window at the ATF and the cops. Sarah says she doesn't want to live in this world anymore. She wants to go to Jesus. Aben says, "If you die fighting an army of sodomite protecting islanders, I suspect the good Lord's going to give you a mansion in his kingdom." Sarah says, "You always know what to say to make me feel better, Daddy. Now learn ye the parable of a fig tree." Aben says, "Yes, such as Matthew 24, when his branch is yet tender, and putteth forth leaves, know that summer is nigh." Well, baby, looks like summer's about as nigh as it's ever going to get. And then they start shooting out the windows again. Now, I don't know what a lot of that means, because godless heathen, but, you can kind of figure that out a little bit. Cut back to Jared, who is still tied to this cross. Cheyenne comes in, cuts him down, and takes him upstairs to the children at gunpoint and hides him in her room. She tells him she doesn't want to shoot him, but she will. He asks if his friends are dead, and she nods. He says, "You might as well kill me too." She says that if he helps her, she won't, but if he doesn't help her, she will. She swears. She won't do it. She tells him about the agents wanting to kill her family, and he seems pretty pleased about that idea, as I think most people in his situation would. She tells him the agents are going to kill everyone inside, so they can't tell the whole world what a clusterfuck this operation was. But she wants his help getting the little ones out so they can tell the world what happened. She's trying to get the kids out to help save the kids, but she's also wanting to expose this group of people for completely screwing up this operation. And she thinks it's going to make them heroes, and people will see what they're doing at the church, and they'll see what they're doing is right, and people will stop looking at them like they're crazy. So what she's doing is a good thing, but partially for the wrong reasons. But again, she believes in what she's doing. These people are great villains. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Jared doesn't seem to give a damn. Cheyenne has this twisted sense of self-righteousness about wanting to keep the Zionist media from making heroes out of the agents, and she wants to use Jared as a witness to their fuck-up. She wants them to know the truth about what they're doing in the church, which was, killing people. So, fuck her. Back at the window shootout, Aben asks Sarah for some sweet tea. Dude's just loving this shit. It's hilarious. He's just, couple shots out the window, taking cover. He says, "Can you bring me some sweet tea?" Like, hey, this is a nice day. I'm shooting at some cops, and it's a good day. So back upstairs, Jared argues with Cheyenne about how she killed his friends, and now she wants his help. She cries about how the kids are only 3 or something, and she doesn't care much about what happens to her as much as she does about the babies. She cares about the babies. So she tries to talk Jared into helping, telling him that the ATF won't believe that he wasn't part of the family. And at this point, he doesn't care. He's been through just so much garbage at this point, and he doesn't care about anything anymore. So now he's all up in her grill, saying fuck you and your family and your kids and all that stuff. He's practically begging her to kill him. Cut back to Sarah as she's going through the church, which I guess is between the windows and the kitchen, and she notices the ball gag that they had used on Jared is laying on the floor, and she runs upstairs. She attacks him. Cheyenne points her gun at Sarah and tries to reason with her about a surrender to save the babies, and so they get into a fight over the gun. Sarah is shot in the stomach, which is good because she was a terrible human being. Cheyenne cries. Jared tries to run out, and the younglings have come from the attic to see what's going on, and they see Sarah all dead. Cheyenne tells them to hide upstairs in the attic because there are men outside trying to kill them. Kids start freaking out, and then they run away. Now, because of the orders the ATF agents were given, and the fact that after this point we never see the children again, nobody knows for sure what happened to the kids. But Kevin said, and I can't remember exactly how it went, but he said there is a sound clip during a different part of the movie after this point that reveals the fate of the children. And if I remember correctly, they didn't make it out. If you're gonna have kids get killed in your movie, the best way to handle that is off screen. I firmly believe that. So that's nice. Back at the window battle, the ATF is storming the castle. They've busted through the gate, and they're on their way in. Firefight ensues. Aben orders 2 of the 5 pointers to go up to the roof. One of these 2, if I remember correctly, is Kevin's wife, Jen Schwabach. She's a nice lady, from what I understand. I don't know, I've never met her. I hope she's a nice lady. I hope eventually that, we all get to hang out and go eat Bloomin' Onion together. That'd be fun. So, cut to Stephen Root's sheriff car. Camera cuts back to one of the 5 pointers on the roof, and then back to the cop car. And one of the shots that Jen fires splatters Stephen Root's brains all over his driver's side window. Cuts between the 5 pointers and the agents. John Goodman drops 2 of the 5 pointers, he drops the 2 5-pointers on the roof. As the agents make their way into the house, they start tear gassing the building. We cut to the children in the attic who are panicking. Okay, so we did get to see them again after that. And then we cut to Travis's body floating in the fountain as John Goodman passes it. Cheyenne and Jared run into John Goodman. He orders them to freeze and to drop their weapons. Jared tells them not to shoot because he's a hostage. Cheyenne wants to talk to whoever's in charge. Goodman orders her to get back. She doesn't listen. And then the agent from the stable runs up to Goodman's side and shoots her in the face. Then he kills Jared because all of the assailants were killed during the resulting firefight. And then suddenly, a deafening horn blast erupts in the sky. It's just whomp. All of the agents react accordingly. The 5-pointers get all kinds of excited after it blasts a couple times. They all drop their weapons and go out to confront the agents. The agents draw on the 5-pointers. Aben tells them there's no need for that no more. Goodman says, "Where's that sound coming from?" Aben starts quoting scripture again. He claims that the rapture has come and that God is going to send this evil world straight to hell. One of the 5-pointers tries to make a break for it, and an agent kills him dead. Goodman calls him off, trying to figure out what the fuck is going on, and now for probably the best scene in the entire movie. Goodman says, "No more fire and brimstone, preacher. What does that sound mean?" Cooper says, "Well, boy, there ain't nothing left but fire and brimstone. Can't you hear? Can't you hear? It's the Lord's day of judgment. 4 trumpet blasts, the seals have been opened, and the horsemen dispatched. 3 more blasts, and he closes the book on this wicked, wicked world. Praise his name. So come on, G-man. G for godless, G for government. Come on, shoot me. Shoot me, you boot-licking, flag-worshipping heathen! Shoot me. It only hastens my reward in eternity. Shoot me, shoot me, shoot me, shoot me!" Cut to shots of Cheyenne and Jared. Cut to an overhead and pull back up into the sky of Aben standing in front of John Goodman with his arms stretched out, and all of the agents zeroed in on Aben Cooper. And then a voice says, "And then what happened? Special Agent Keenan, what happened?" Cut to John Goodman looking out a window in a debriefing testimony area, and he says, "I subdued the suspect with a headbutt." The other agents laugh and question it, and he says, "He was standing unnaturally close." The trumpet blasted 5 more times, and then it was clear that the rapture wasn't happening. They rounded up the remaining 5 pointers. They tell him on record they commend him for peaceably containing a possibly violent situation, but off the record, he did disobey a direct order from his superior. Goodman looks over at the other agents, and there's a chart of the church members, profile photos, pictures of various people dead at the scene. One of the agents says, "It is the finding of this inquiry that Goodman be relieved of command of his current field office, be placed on 1-week leave without pay, at which point he will go to Washington for reassignment in the district." That's right, Goodman got promoted. He looks at the other agents and says, horrified, "You're still going to kill him?" To which one agent replies, "The U.S. government doesn't kill people, in or out of custody." And the other says, after turning off a video camera to film the testimony, he says, "Of course we're going to kill him. Kill him with kindness." Goodman questions, he says, "You going to let him go to trial?" One of the other agents just says, "Patriot Act, bitch," saying they can plant him forever without a trial, never let him see the light of day again. So, I don't know anything about the Patriot Act. I had pulled up some stuff about it, but it's a bunch of legal baloney that I don't totally understand. So feel free to look that up for yourself. Goodman is confused. They tell him that Aben Cooper is a terrorist, and says, "If you kill an American because of a religious belief, you are a terrorist, and terrorists get locked the fuck up." Goodman asks if it was that easy, why was he given orders to kill them all? Simple answer, because fuck people like this. Then the 2 agents start making prison rape jokes and ask John Goodman what was making the trumpet blasts. Turns out some college kids had gotten an acre of land at the end of the compound property across a hill and were using it for compost. The 5 pointers went to rough them up over the use of the compost because they suck. So the kids went and bought an old firehouse horn. Remember, beginning of the movie? They hooked it up to some huge speakers to mess with the 5 pointers. He said the thing was as big as a Mini Cooper. They hooked it up to an iPod, playing single-note trumpet blasts out of it. One of the agents says, "They had no idea you were even there." And John Goodman's like, "It was just dumb luck." So the agents talk a little bit more, and then one of them asks Goodman why he disobeyed his direct order. And Goodman says this, "My grandma on my mother's side, she had these 2 dogs, pure bloodhounds. Both came up the same litter. She kept them, gave the rest away to neighbors. Both known each other since they had shit in their eyes. Neither one never treated any better than the other one. Gentlest dogs you'd ever care to meet. So, anyway, Thanksgiving of my 9th year, these 2 old dogs are trailing me around because they know the score. I'm an animal lover who never finishes his supper. So right before I get up from the table, I toss these 2 old-timers a turkey leg attached to a hunk of cartilage. And it was like they'd never met. They went at each other so ferociously, all tooth and claw and jugular. They forgot anything they ever had in common, scrapped like that discard decided between their standing and dying. People just do the strangest things when they believe they're entitled, but they do even stranger things when they just plain believe." He lays his gun and his badge down on the table in front of the agents, and then he walks out. Cut to prison. Go through the prison a little bit, and we see Aben Cooper in his cell, and he's singing. The last line of the film is another prisoner yelling at him to shut the fuck up. That voice was director Kevin Smith. Made a cameo. So, fun fact about this movie. If you ever get the chance, it used to be on Netflix and it's not anymore. I used to watch it all the time. If you ever get the chance to watch any of Kevin's, like his Evening with Kevin Smith DVDs, or any of his Q&As, his talk sessions that he did, that he put out on DVD, watch them. Very insightful, full of just, good stories and information for filmmakers or storytellers or whatever. But during his DVD special, Kevin Smith Burn in Hell, which was made like immediately after Red State was done, they had done all the press for it and stuff like that. He talks about the original ending for this movie, which I can't remember all the details for, so I'm not going to go super into it. But to hear him talk about it, both endings would have been great. The original ending was that the rapture happened. He said, the trumpet blasts came, and then the earth was going to crack open, and you were going to see the horsemen of the apocalypse and stuff, and that's how the movie was going to end, which would have been a great ending for this movie. But, budgets and stuff, so they did what they could, and this ending works just as well. Either one would have been fine. So, that's Red State. Like I said, I don't have enough nice things to say about this movie. I implore you to check this movie out. I don't know anybody who wouldn't like this movie. I mean, my wife even likes this movie, and she's not big on, thrillers and horror and stuff like that, so I wouldn't show this movie to, like, your grandmother. She probably wouldn't appreciate it, all the violence and the language. But, most people, I think, would appreciate this film. So that's going to do it for Red State. One of my favorite films, from probably my favorite filmmaker. Like I said, there is no make your own decision this time around. Watch this movie. You won't regret it. So, moving on to our next episode. There's a YouTuber that I've started following. Chris Stuckman, I believe is his name. He does movie reviews, and he covered a movie that I'd considered doing for this show, but after seeing what he did with it, I decided not to do that. We're getting some good Stephen King stuff pretty soon. Dark Tower comes out on the 4th. At the time of this recording, it is the 3rd. Early reviews are coming in. It's a mixed bag from what I've seen. I don't care. I'm going to see The Dark Tower. That's all there is to it. And then in September, the feature film version of It comes out, and I cannot wait to see that movie. It's gonna be great. So, this dude decided, since we're getting some King material in the next couple months, to cover one of Stephen King's lesser known film adaptations. And it's not even an adaptation. I'm pretty sure this is a screenplay that he did. I can't remember exactly. But he covered Sleepwalkers, and I'm not going to talk too much about it. You can go check that out for yourself. But if you get the chance, you should definitely watch Sleepwalkers. It is awful. Awful movie. But I decided to kind of go in the same direction, since that only makes sense to cover the King, since he's going to have some stuff coming out soon. So what I did instead was I found a movie that I'd been wanting to watch since I first found it on the Xbox Marketplace so many years ago. I found it, and I watched it, did some notes on it, and it's going to be our next episode in our new format. It is a movie called You Can't Kill Stephen King, and is about a group of teenagers who go to a lake house in Maine and decide to check out Stephen King's house along the way. So I can't wait to get into that, because I gotta tell you, it was pretty enjoyable. Spoiler alert, I enjoyed it. So I hope you enjoyed the time that we spent together. I know I enjoyed the time we spent together. I will see you next time, and until then, keep your S-foils locked into attack position.